I want to get back to this impeachment inquiry that I just mentioned a moment ago, because this thing's going to continue to heat up. I believe that we really need to make the case. You've heard me say this before. Jim Jordan is going to join us in just a second. And I think that I mentioned this yesterday, but Nancy Mace was on this week. Jim Jordan's been out there on Fox and all over the place talking about the receipts that the kids call them. You know, the emails, the texts, the big guy, Tony Bobolinsky, Devin Archer, the testimony talking about Biden being in the room or calling in to these business meetings after saying he had nothing to do with it. But if Republicans want the average American to be on board, they need to make the case better. They need to tell people what this evidence is, why what Biden did rises to the level of impeachment. Remember, high crimes and misdemeanor, treason, or bribery. That's what the Constitution says. So next Thursday, they're going to have this hearing in the House Oversight Committee for the first time and start to go through a lot of this stuff. And I think it's important that they systematically make a good case. You heard Seb Gorka's criticism yesterday. He doesn't think Comer is making a strong enough case. There's word out that he's going to subpoena the personal bank records for both Hunter and James Biden. And I think it's important to show, here's the money, here's the flow of money. Here's where it's going. We already know that they weren't qualified for it. So we know that. And I think it's important, though, to break down all of the evidence that does exist, because you hear it over and over and over again from these folks in the media. John Carl, the folk, Abby Phillip on CNN, she was questioning Matt Gaetz. There's no evidence. There is evidence. You may not like it. You may not find it compelling, folks in the media, but it exists. It's unequivocal. Devin Archer testified about his business dealings with Hunter Biden. Tony Bobolinsky testified. There are text messages. There's email. There's a video of Biden interacting with people and Hunter standing there. Right? So we know that exists. And I think that they just need to start doing a better job of making sure that people see it. I mean, I would hold it up. Here it is. Here's the record. Here's the sheet that shows this. But they need to do a better job, because you cannot have the media. I get it. They're covering for them. They got the memo. We talked about it yesterday. The White House sent that memo out to these news organizations about how you have to cover it, and they all took it in, which is great. And so we've got a lot to break down on that front. I also want to talk to Chairman Jordan about what's going on in the House on spending, because we are down to the wire on funding the government. Now, again, a shutdown for a little while isn't the end of the world. So, but here's my question. When the House Freedom Caucus, which is made up of the hardcore folks that Jim Jordan helped found, cuts a deal and says, hey, we're good with this, and then you've got people like Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene saying it's not good enough, then what is it they want? Because you can't tell me that you get an 8% cut in spending, you get H.R. 2, which is the border bill, and you're still not happy. I get it. Not everyone's going to get everything. But that's a pretty hardcore deal, folks. And you're getting told that that's not good enough. You, at some point, take a win. That's not everything, but it's moving the ball in the right direction. What the Senate sent over is a joke. I am embarrassed for a lot of those Republicans that voted for that. It's like they all cut these deals. Because, you know, we've heard it before. I mean, Ron Johnson, when he was on the show, they want spending too. They want to go home and tell you that they're hardcore conservatives and that fiscal discipline is important to them, but it's not. So these guys in the House standing firm is a big deal. And if you can't do it, then the Senate's just going to say, great, you didn't pass anything. So pass this. I also want to get his take on Speaker McCarthy. I think that's going to be important as well. But interestingly, Hunter Biden actually, as I mentioned this, sued the IRS. What a dummy. You really want to get into this? You want these guys talking more openly through a case about what you did do? what you didn't pay taxes on, because it was shady business deals, write-offs that no one is allowed to do. You can't write off a hooker. Pretty sure my accountant said that. And yet he was trying to do that. So I'm not really sure that this is the place that you want to go, Hunter. Suing the IRS, saying that these whistleblowers revealed too much information about you. Be careful what you wish for. All right. As I mentioned, we have a great interview with Jim Jordan coming up. As I told you a minute ago, Jim, obviously, member of Congress from Ohio. He represents the 4th District, but he has been a leader in fiscal discipline, holding this administration accountable. He was a great friend of President Trump during the White House, continues to be a big supporter of President Trump. But aside from his chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee, I think I mentioned this a minute ago, he founded the Freedom Caucus. So when Jim Jordan tells you the deal is good, that's kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval for conservatives. So I'm excited to share this conversation with you. Without further ado, let me bring in the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Jordan. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us today. News coming out, obviously, that your colleague, Chairman Jim Comer of the Oversight Committee, is starting this first hearing. Just for a moment, lay out the goal of the impeachment inquiry. Is it to build a case, to find more evidence? What do you guys hope to achieve through the inquiry process?
I don't know that it's that there's a set thing you're trying to achieve. I just think it's something that you have to do because that's our duty. We have a constitutional duty to do oversight. When you have this much evidence, this many facts piling up and pointing to potential wrongdoing from the president of the United States, you have to move to the next phase of our constitutional duty to do oversight, which is an impeachment inquiry phase. And frankly, what that does is once you move into that phase, courts have long recognized that now we're functioning from a duty in the Constitution that's exclusively the House of Representatives, the impeachment power of the House. That is our basis for getting information. And if you get into these conflicts with the executive branch, as inevitably happen, the courts are much more likely to say, okay, the House is engaged in a fundamental duty they have under the Constitution that exclusively resides with them, more inclined to give us the benefit of getting the documents and access to witnesses that we want. And so that's why I think we had to go here. I thought the speaker was right to do so. And we're just going to continue to do our oversight work and get the facts.
All right, so let's dispel some of the myths from the left. I want to start with, and I'm going to build up because there's some, but the first one is when Trump was indicted, Republicans in the House were very clear that there was not an initial vote to begin this process. Democrats are now, of course, using that and saying, well, Republicans aren't following what they had preached for Democrats to do. How do you answer that?
Well, look, Speaker McCarthy said there may be a vote at some point. Second, you don't need to have a vote to move into this phase. There are court cases on that. There's been judges who've been impeached and there was never a vote by the full House to proceed with that.